The first question you need to ask yourself is, what goal do I want to pursue? And the first protocol for deciding what goal you want to pursue is actually a quite simple one in terms of how it's stated, but it's fairly complex for a lot of people to answer, and that is, which specific goal are you going to try and pursue? Because guess what, folks? Most people who try to achieve many goals simultaneously fail at all of them. This is what I call the overhaul approach. When people think, okay, on January 1 or next month or next week, or perhaps even today, I'm going to start exercising, I'm going to start meditating, I'm going to learn a language, I'm going to learn to dance, I'm going to do all these different things. And that's just too many goals. I think here is an appropriate place to highlight the word priority. A priority literally means one thing that you place ahead of all others. These days we hear a lot about priorities, plural, but we really should be thinking about priority and defining our priority for learning in a given phase. So if you are somebody who wants to get more physically fit, or you want to learn something cognitively, that's terrific. You are allowed to have multiple goals, but I highly recommend that you first select just one goal. Of course, you don't let go of other aspects of your mental health and physical health, that you don't throw your life away in service to this one goal. We've all seen how that goes, and it's not a pretty picture. But rather that you continue to engage in healthy ways with the other aspects of your life that you're proficient at, or mostly proficient at, but that you select one goal that you're going to try and attain. How you select that one goal, of course, is going to reflect your values, your motivation, your resources, but it's very important that you spend some serious time defining that one priority, that one goal for this initial goal setting and pursuit period. And in a moment, I'll tell you how long that goal pursuit period ought to be. But for some people, the best way to define which goal they're going to pursue is to write out the different things that they want and then essentially cross off the various things that they're willing to put on hold for the time being and circle the thing that they're really going to focus on, and only that thing. And again, this is highly individual. It's going to depend on you, your past, your present, your future, your resources, all of that. But having that one priority is going to really increase the probability that you're going to achieve your goal. Now, we also know from the scientific literature that how lofty that goal is will impact whether or not you are able to achieve it. And I think most people mistakenly believe that if a goal is easy to achieve, it's more likely that they will achieve that goal. Sort of a duh. But in fact, the opposite has been shown to be true. If a goal is too easy to achieve, it seems that it doesn't recruit sufficient amounts of the arousal network that involves the amygdala, but a bunch of other brain structures as well, that get people into the necessary actions to continually pursue that goal. This perhaps should not be surprising. In order to learn something, we have to shift our nervous system into states that are somewhat uncomfortable. These should be safely uncomfortable states, but they should be uncomfortable states. And we're going to talk more about this as the episode continues, but any kind of successful learning or goal pursuit is going to involve errors. It's going to involve failures. It's going to involve frustration. It's going to involve anxiety. All of those states of mind and body, in fact, shift the brain into modes of so-called neuroplasticity. They give it the ability to change. And that should make perfect sense, because if you can complete what you need to do easily, there's absolutely no reason for the neural circuitry in your brain or body to shift in any way. Why would it? Rather, those states of discomfort, frustration, anxiety, etc., represent shifts in neurochemical states that literally open the opportunity for neuroplasticity to occur, the changes between neurons that allow those neurons and their associated neural circuits to perform differently in the future when we learn something. So the key here is twofold. First, define the specific priority goal that you're going to pursue and set aside all other goal pursuits. And in doing that, it makes sense to pursue a somewhat loftier goal than perhaps a more mundane goal. Or if you know exactly what goal you're going to prioritize, that you try and achieve perhaps more than you think you ought to be able to achieve within that given goal. And within the goal that you decide to prioritize, you want to set a level of progress, a level of performance that you're striving to attain that's a bit above what you actually believe at this time you can accomplish. Now, in doing so, you are inevitably going to encounter some frustration and anxiety. But remember the component of the neural circuitry that we talked about at the beginning of the episode, the orbital frontal cortex. That orbital frontal cortex is not just part of a neural circuitry that assesses how we feel in a given moment as we are trying to pursue a goal, but it also understands context. It has the capacity to, for instance, see that you are experiencing anxiety, know that you are frustrated, but now that you understand that anxiety and frustration that comes with making errors is actually the gateway, it's a necessary gateway to achieving neural circuit changes, so-called neuroplasticity. Well, the orbital frontal cortex understands that context. It literally can take information about neuroplasticity, it can take information about frustration, which you now have, and it can combine those such that when you experience that frustration, you experience those errors, and you previously would have wanted to quit, now you know that you are literally making progress. You're literally shifting those neural circuits in the direction of improved learning. Now, it's also important to remind that neuroplasticity, the changes in neural circuits that allow for improved performance in the future, does not occur instantaneously. That frustration that occurs during our attempts to learn or to pursue a goal is the trigger for neuroplasticity, the actual rewiring of neural circuits that allows for proficient, correct performance occurs during deep sleep and other forms of deep rest. This is something I've covered extensively in episodes on neuroplasticity and learning. And if you'd like to learn more about neuroplasticity, in fact, if you'd like a zero-cost toolkit that defines the so-called super protocol for neuroplasticity and learning that is not just nested within the context of goal pursuit and learning, we have that. You can go to hubermanlab.com, you go to the menu, go scroll down to newsletter, and you can sign up. It's completely zero cost, and you'll get that as a brief. I believe it's a 2 or maybe 3-page PDF. Okay, so returning to goal setting and pursuit, first you need to set your goal. You really should take the time required to define your priority. What are you going to try and learn? And then you're going to pick a goal that really feels challenging, that feels like it might even be out of reach, because that will recruit the neural circuits associated with arousal. They're motivating enough to get you into action. Now, I want to be very clear. I'm not suggesting that you pick a goal that's impossible to achieve or that you believe is impossible to achieve. That's not going to serve you well. Rather, I'm saying pick a goal that feels just a bit out of reach. And don't obsess too much about whether or not it's a lot out of reach or a little bit out of reach. Pick something you're excited to pursue that you would really like to accomplish. Set that goal, and then just set aside all other goals. Still, of course, maintain or improve other aspects of your life that are necessary for daily living, for mental health, physical health, etc. But really just focus on one goal. I promise that you will be far more satisfied with the results if you can truly set a priority. So once you've defined the specific goal that you are going to prioritize, there are 2 more things that you need to do before you start to pursue that goal. The first one is that you need to define the specific verbs, the actions that are involved in pursuing that goal. This is absolutely critical. A lot of people will set a sort of title goal or a goal state. They'll say, oh, I want to be rich, or I want to be smart, or they will say, I want to be fit or proficient in a given language. It's really important that you put additional specificity on your goal. In fact, it's important that you put a lot of specificity on your goal and that you focus mainly on verbs when defining that specificity. Now, there are a lot of reasons for this that have to do both with increasing the probability that you will achieve your goal, as well as maintaining motivation as you pursue that goal. So for instance, rather than saying you want to be fit or you want to be a better runner or swimmer, you would want to get very specific about the verb that you're going to engage in order to achieve that goal. Now, it's somewhat obvious in the case of running or swimming. I think everyone understands that if you want to be a better runner, there is going to be some running involved. If you want to be a better swimmer, there's going to be some swimming involved, of course. But presumably there will be some other behaviors as well. Everything from driving to the pool or lacing up your shoes. I mean, there's an essentially near infinite number of verbs involved in any type of goal pursuit. So what we are talking about here is really defining the goal on a piece of paper, and I do think that's important. You should write this down, and I think the process of selecting your goal, that priority, as well as defining the specificity of the verb action that you're going to pursue should be done on paper. You, of course, are going to think, but then you should write it out. Seeing things on paper and writing them out by hand with pen or pencil really has been shown to engage neural circuitry in a way that is different than typing with your thumbs into your phone, which, by the way, is a new feature of human evolution. I do believe This is the first time in human evolution that we have written with our thumbs. I don't know. I don't have a time machine. I can't go back and check, but I'm willing to place a bet that that statement is correct. So the point is that writing things out is not only important, it's also the most effective way to embed knowledge in our nervous system. And so I highly recommend that you write things out on a piece of paper in your process of goal setting. So when we are talking about generating verb specificity about your goal, it would look like the following. So let's say I want to, quote unquote, get more fit, or learn conversational French, or anything for that matter, gardening. Maybe I want to build a gazebo in the backyard or a deck in the backyard. The key thing to answer is, what is the major block of action that's going to be involved in pursuing that goal? So for instance, if you want to get more fit and you're going to do that primarily through running and weight training or swimming and weight training, you would want to get very specific in defining that priority goal as, I'm going to run X number of miles per week, or I'm going to go to the gym 3 times per week to lift weights. Although I would recommend getting even more specific than that. I would recommend that you literally write down, I'm going to go to the gym 3 times per week for a minimum of 60 minutes, where 50 minutes of that are carrying out hard work, okay, with, of course, rest between sets, etc. Or I'm going to attend 3 classes per week, or perhaps even just 1 class per week of learning conversational French, plus I'm going to spend 2 hours per week of practicing, say, word problems or mathematical problems. Whatever it is, you want to define first the priority, then you want to define the verb action that represents the bulk of effort towards that priority. So running in the case of the person who wants to get fit by running, weightlifting in the case of the person that wants to get fit by weightlifting, although of course I highly recommend people do both resistance training and training if indeed they want to be truly fit. Or in the case of language learning or learning how to code or gardening or something of that sort, to really define the verb actions involved and then to place specificity in terms of the amount of time that one is going to try to achieve each week in pursuit of that specific priority goal. Now, I realize that that process itself takes a bit of time, but when you look back on the 100-year plus scientific literature of what leads to successful goal setting and pursuit, you find over and over again that those 2 components we've been talking about, specificity and measurability, are paramount. You just simply cannot discard those from the process if you expect yourself to achieve your goals. So whether or not it's the ABC method or it's the SMART method or the SMARTER method, again, all acronyms coined not by me but by others previous to this conversation, you're going to find elements of specificity and measurability showing up again and again. So these are key features of any protocol that you are going to use in order to try and set and achieve your goals. And I should mention that setting specific goals and clearly defining the verbs that you are going to engage in to pursue those goals, and defining how long you are going to try and engage in those verbs each week to achieve those goals, has significant impact on the probability of success. We're not talking about a minor effect. In fact, in the original episode I did about goal setting and pursuit, I talked about the so-called recycling study. I'm not going to describe it in a lot of detail right now, but essentially this study looked at motivating people to recycle more recyclable products in the workplace. And what they found was that when people were told what the specific goal was and what specific actions they needed to engage in were, and how much of a given batch of refuse, so say, after lunch, there's some boxes, there's some forks, etc., some napkins, how much of that refuse they were going to try to put into the recycle versus the trash, it led to a greater than doubling of successful achievement of that goal. Now, that's a perhaps trivial goal to some of you, although let's face it, recycling is important. But that result has been shown again and again and again for different domains of goal setting and pursuit. So this thing of setting specificity, really spending time with it on paper, setting specificity of actions, so which specific actions, and then setting specificity of how long you are going to engage in each of those actions each week, greatly increases the probability that you will achieve that what previously seemed to be a all too lofty goal. Earlier, I mentioned that during the course of today's episode, we were going to dispel some common myths about goal setting and pursuit. So now I'd like to mention 2 popular myths about goal setting and pursuit. The first one is that if we set a Post-it, a little Post-it sticky where you write down what you're trying to achieve, and you put that on the refrigerator or you put that on your mirror, that it increases the probability that you are going to stick to your goal. Turns out that is not the case. And the reason for that is that your visual system adapts to whatever is regular in your environment. Doesn't matter whether or not that environment is sparse, so it only has a few things in it, or whether or not it is dense, like a forest. Anything that shows up regularly in our visual environment gets canceled out. This is actually a basic feature of the way your visual system is wired. So for those of you that are taking a sticky note or a magnet or a sign and putting it on your mirror and leaving it there from day to day, maybe that says, run 60 minutes today or study French 20 minutes or whatever the goal happens to be. If you leave it there day to day to day, it actually diminishes the likelihood of progress. I know that seems kind of hard to believe, but it's true. Instead, a better approach is to continually write that thing out each day and put up a new sticky, put it in a new place, perhaps on the refrigerator, sometimes in the kitchen, maybe on the windshield of your car, although of course remove that while you're driving, etc. So visual reminders can be very effective. If you want to use them, great. You certainly don't have to. But if you're going to use them, you want to update them every single day. Otherwise, your visual system and certainly the areas of your brain that are associated with assessing novelty and emotionality will simply start to cancel those away. So the first common myth that we're dispelling is what I call the Post-it fallacy. The idea that if you write something down on a Post-it and you post it in an area that you frequent every morning or every day or every night, that you stand a higher probability of adhering to what is on that Post-it. That is simply not true. You would want to replace it every day, and you would also be wise to move that Post-it to different locations. The second myth is that if you want to increase your motivation toward pursuing a goal, and you want to increase the probability that you will achieve that goal, that you should engage in so-called accountability, meaning that you should tell people you are going to achieve that goal. Now, I realize that there are some prominent examples in pop culture of people posting something on social media and saying, in 3 years, I'm going to be, playing in Wembley Stadium, or in 2 years, watch, I'm going to be at the top level of my game, whatever that game happens to be. Sure, there are examples of that, and those are beautiful and inspiring examples. However, the scientific data tell us that if we inform people around us that, for instance, we are going to write a book, or that we're going to start a podcast, or that we are going to run a marathon, or whatever it happens to be, more often than not, we get feedback that is generally positive in form. I think that's good and to be expected, frankly. If a friend tells us, hey, I'm going to write a book, or I'm going to pursue a new fitness goal, or I'm going to learn a language, we say, great, go for it. You can totally do it. You're very likely to succeed. Go for it. How do you want me to support you? Is there anything I can do to support you? Those all are, frankly, healthy exchanges. And yet, the data tell us that the positive feedback that we get from others when we announce that we're going after a goal activate certain reward systems and motivation systems within our brain that then quickly dissipate and then diminish the probability that we'll engage in the type of behaviors that actually lead us to achieve that goal. So we have the Post-it fallacy, and we have the myth of accountability fallacy within the context of goal pursuit. I, of course, am not saying that accountability is bad. To the contrary, accountability is a great thing, both to ourselves and to others. It's something that we should all cultivate throughout life. I'm merely talking about the myth of accountability in the context of goal pursuit, and I'm actually being more specific than that. I'm saying don't tell people that you're going to go out and achieve something prior to initiating action toward that goal, because, in fact, the positive feedback that we get will diminish the probability that we will continually pursue that goal in a way that allows us to achieve it. So you could interpret the information I just gave you as meaning that perhaps it's better to tell someone who doubts us that we are going to achieve a goal, and then, of course, they're not going to give us the positive feedback. We're not going to get all that reward circuitry activated. Rather, we're going to get the friction circuitry activated of us wanting to prove ourselves and overcome the let's just say the lack of faith in our ability to achieve a goal. And indeed, that can work. There is evidence that can work, but Then, of course, you have to find someone who doesn't believe in you. You have to get them to tell you they don't believe in you. And that could have all sorts of deleterious psychological effects that might undermine the goal pursuit process and other things as well. So if you are lucky enough to know somebody who doubts you, go ahead, tell them that you want to pursue your specific priority goal. But more likely than not, the best thing to do is to simply keep that goal to yourself. You may need to inform a family member or others of where you will be between the hours of, say, 8 a.m. and 9 a.m. if you're going to be exercising or learning language or meditating, whatever it is during that period of time. But what I'm referring to here is what I will call the don't tell the world rule. Don't tell the world that you're going to achieve X, Y, or Z. Just simply tell yourself. In fact, I would suggest that the more time you can spend with that 1 or 2 or 3 sheets of paper where you defined the goal, the specific actions that you're going to take, how you're going to measure progress, which we'll talk about a bit more later, the more time that you can spend with that goal in your mind and on that paper, the higher the probability that you will achieve that goal. That stands in stark contrast to telling everyone around you that you're going to achieve a certain goal, the so-called accountability myth, or the myth of accountability within the context of goal pursuit would be the more specific way to describe that myth. Now, it turns out there is some utility to having one person that is a so-called accountability buddy, if that person is really just strictly addressing accountability. They are reminding you to do what you need to do, or they are asking you, did you do what you said you were going to do? But that's a bit more of a tough love accountability model. What the don't tell the world rule is really about is not getting the kind of dopamine and other forms of neurochemical reward that come from just simply saying that you're going to pursue a goal. Because as you'll soon learn, that dopamine and other molecules too, of course, are going to be critically important, not just for initiating the sorts of actions required to achieve your goals, but for re-engaging and constantly updating your strategy to ensure that you reach your goals. It's worth mentioning that the friction model of achieving your goals does work. I mean, I, for instance, am somebody that if I were to say to a family member or friend, hey, I'm going to achieve a particular goal, and they said, no, there's no way you can do it, that would recruit a certain set of neural circuits and hormones and neurochemicals in me that would make me much more likely to lean into the required set of efforts to achieve that goal. But there's a danger in approaching a given goal that way, especially if the goal is something that you already want to pursue, which is that then a lot of your effort becomes framed in the context of making someone else wrong as opposed to achieving the goal. And of course, you can do two things in parallel. You can achieve your goal and prove somebody else wrong. But as we've talked about in various episodes on motivation and pursuit and the dopamine system, and as we'll talk about a bit more in a few minutes, there's something tremendously powerful about learning how to derive pleasure from the effort process itself. That is, learning to enjoy the process of pursuing a goal for sake of that goal for yourself, rather than trying to pursue a goal simply to prove somebody else wrong. I'll just tell you right now that intrinsic motivation that is directly attached to the thing that you are doing en route to a goal, is the most powerful and sustainable source of motivation.